Hey sports fans, Coach Nick here and welcome to B-Ball Breakdown. Don't miss our post-game show tomorrow night after the Rockets visit the Thunder. A couple bounces either way and that series really could be 2-2, so I'll keep my eye on that and we'll talk about it with lots of other playoff coverage as well. Well, let's get into the Indiana versus Atlanta series. We haven't done an individual game breakdown yet, so I want to give you a bit of an overview of what's happening and how these teams are attacking each other. Certainly it's interesting because the Pacers were able to take a 2-0 advantage and look pretty ho-hum about it, and now Atlanta has stormed back to tie the series. So I'm going to show you some interesting things you probably aren't seeing anywhere else based on the stats. The big difference Larry Drew made was to go big by taking Korver out of the starting lineup. This allowed him to attack the Pacers bench, like Gerald Green, who goes under this pin down, a big no-no. Out of horns, Korver runs the flex action on the weak side, and wouldn't you know it, Green makes the same mistake and Korver takes advantage. When you separate the stats by wins and losses, some fascinating numbers pop up. Looking at Atlanta's defensive rating, it's no surprise that it goes up significantly in their 2 losses compared to their wins. Their offensive rating remains virtually the same. This falls under the normal guideline that defense wins championships. However, look at the Pacers' ratings when separated by wins and losses. They are the complete opposite. Their defense has remained virtually the same, but it's their offense that has suffered greatly in their 2 losses. Digging deeper, every one of their starters' offensive rating takes a huge nosedive, none more so than Paul George. In this series, he's really only had one good stretch of offensive basketball, the first quarter of Game 2. And it's important to examine those shots to understand how he attacks best. I'm really impressed by how well George uses the offense to help him get shots. Here's a simple cutoff center that gets him a layup. And here's the Pacers running horns, where Paul gets the flex action, then gets a flare screen where he can attack off the dribble into the lane and get a nice pull-up. Where Paul can get into trouble is when he dribbles too much and falls in love with the long step-back jumper. In transition, he can be lethal, but if it's not there, he needs to stay away from these quick shots that can kill an offense. However, if he can get at least into the lane, these shots are a lot easier to make, and notice how he doesn't step back on this one. Here's another example of why he should avoid the step back in transition, especially with Josh Smith on him. When Paul George lets the offense create the shot for him, he can be a very solid 3-point shooter. Here's a simple handoff where Smith gets screened off. However, getting the great look is only half the battle. In the playoffs, you still need to finish the shot, and this is where Paul George has been getting into trouble. He gets the ineffective pin down from Hibbert, then a ball screen from him all in the flow of the offense, but can't hit. The offense keeps working to get him shots. A double down screen to get him a great look at 3, but again, he doesn't knock it down. Devin Harris has had problems guarding him, and on this nice curl on the weak side, George has to be able to finish these shots at the rim. Paul George is a very good rebounder, and when he's not shooting well, finds other ways to help his team score. Here's a good example of George using the offense, but when a good shot doesn't present itself, he suffers when it becomes an ISO with his shot clock winding down. Again, watch how George blends into the offense with a simple post feed, then a down screen from West to get open for a catch and shoot 3. The bottom line is that while George is doing a fantastic job running the offense and not forcing shots, he's just not hitting the open ones enough to lift the Pacers to a win. And because George stays within the flow of the offense, he doesn't get to the free throw line very often. In Game 4, he didn't even shoot free throws until the 4th quarter, and you can see how every one of these fouls comes from a very aggressive individual move. So there you have it, sports fans. If Indiana is going to rely on Paul George as their #1 threat from the outside in the perimeter, which they do, he's going to have to get to the line a lot more often. And it's hard for me to say anything wrong about a guy who stays within the offense and really lets the offense work for him. It's great. However, when he does that, he's going to have to knock down a few more of those shots. That percentage has to go up higher if they want to win because, again, like I showed you in those stats, it's rare that you'll see a team pretty much stay consistent defensively, but when their offense deserts them like that, they lose the game. And that's what's happening. In the playoffs, you got to be able to put the ball in the bucket a little bit. And right now, Paul George needs to lead the way and can't have such a big drop-off in his offensive rating between wins and losses, because it's a really big gap right now. Well, thanks for joining us. Stay tuned for our post-game show tomorrow night after the Thunder Rockets. It'll be a great one. And don't forget, at B-Ball Breakdown, we're not a channel, we're a conversation. You in?